what I'm thinking. Okay, so we will record to the cloud and we'll just hope that the cloud loves us today.
Yeah.
All right, so welcome. This is the very first contestant on my podcast series that I have invented for this class, but I'm hoping it kind of stands as a model, and I'm hoping that it can be used for future classes as well. And that's why I asked you, Courtney, for permission to have it live on my YouTube channel, which probably gets a hit every 5 years. So I wouldn't worry about it being too
Yeah.
public. So my name is Holly Blackford Humes. I'm a professor at Rutgers Camden. We have a new class going up called Neurodivergence, which is quite a mouthful. I found myself, if I have to say neurodivergence 3 times in a sentence, I often trip over it. So we have this new thing to talk about as an umbrella term. And our special guest today is Courtney Berkeley. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself and your position?
Yeah. So I started my kind of adult career as a teacher, and I taught a lot of AP history classes, but I did a lot of kind of jack of all trades type stuff. I was in technical theater, and we built sets for the theater, and I did psychology at some point. I also helped with robotics club and I've kind of, was involved in a lot of things as a teacher. And then in 2019, I decided I wanted to try a new career. So I got my master's in instructional design, which nobody ever knows what it is, but essentially it's creating courseware. And you can do that for anybody, the military, a hospital, a small business, if a small business needs courseware. But usually we try to make it interactive and we base it off of any material that is given to us for, the learning purposes. And it's a really interesting job. So yeah, I'm enjoying that.
Is this like a technologically complex job? Like, when are you designing the actual software?
So it kind of depends on the company that you work for. The company that I was working for last year, they did a lot of military work. So there was kind of already a framework in place for how you were going to create the courseware. They wanted certain things to be regulated, but you would take technical manuals. So a lot of what I was working with was courses for pilots, like pilots of helicopters and airplanes, and you take the technical manual and you turn that into courseware. We would use authoring tools like Adobe Captivate or Articulate Storyline to create those, but then we also at that company had graphic designers and programmers and various team members that would help us kind of generate things that, maybe might be outside of my abilities and skills. So we could go to them and say like, hey, I need help. I want to create this thing. This is what I want it to look like. And you'd kind of collaborate for that work.
Okay, that's really interesting because at the end of this, after I sort of what I'm trying to do here is give the students a sort of conversational view of the topic and ways to think about it and approach it that maybe they wouldn't get in the traditional readings that we do, something a little bit more of a personal experience. But then at the end, maybe we can talk about different kinds of modes of learning as well, since it's your
Yeah.
expertise. And one of the things I'm trying to do with retooling these pedagogical methods like podcasting, and they're actually going to respond to podcasts with these short reels, kind of TikTok styley reels. I'm trying to diversify methods so that it
Mhm.
reaches sort of neurodivergent styles of learning and different kinds of learning, and trying to get away from just discussion questions and writing all the time as we tend
Mhm.
to fall back in English,
Yeah.
because we can't help it. I'm so text oriented when I watch. My husband needs closed captioning, and when we
Mm.
watch our series with words, I actually can't just listen. I'm reading the text. Like I
Mhm.
can't not read text. So it's very hard for me to process information any other way when there's like text in my face.
Mm.
Um, yeah, so for me, it's almost like I'm so word oriented. I almost have a spatial disability. I can't find my car. I can't, remember where things are sort of spatially. Whereas he's completely oriented towards spatial sort of design, really different. modes of learning. So I brought you in today because you don't mind speaking about your perspective and your experience with neurodivergence. So let's just start with this big old word, neurodivergence. What does it mean to you? How do you think about this approach that we use this umbrella term? And does it help you in any way?
Yeah. So to me, the term neurodivergent, um, I think it stems from the idea that, as we've developed as a human society, we have come up with these ideas about this is the way a typical human being structure is. This is how the body works, this is how the brain works. And we've developed that, and ideas have changed over time. But in general, we have this kind of normal set that is like, this is what a normal human being looks like. And then we have divergences. We have things, where, maybe somebody is born without a hand, somebody's born without, certain physical abilities. But now I think in more recent times have learned and started really coming to the understanding that the brain also has these divergences. So I try to avoid using terms like, well, normal people this, but also, because I don't want to say that it's not normal to be the way that you are. Like you're born that way, you know? So to me, it is another way of being. Even though, society says this is the set that we're supposed to look at and this is how the brain is, supposed to work, there are people that don't work like that. So now I'm kind of trying to view it as a way to help myself understand that maybe society and, traditional schooling and traditional parenting techniques have taught me one way to do things that maybe don't necessarily work with my brain, and that there are some other methods I can try, and there's some other kind of self-help things that I can do to help myself be more successful in life and do the things that I want to do.
I think it's interesting because right away, what comes up is this like dialogic meaning between neurodivergence and some sort of normative ideal in the
Mm-hmm.
center. In fact, hand language even kind of works that way. A lot of people go, well, here's this place where I was raised to be, where society said to be, and I'm
Mm-hmm.
out here. It's almost like it's almost like taking the standard deviation and mapping it with hands. That's what I've noticed people doing.
Mm-hmm.
So it's inherently dialogic. I also notice that it's not just like this normative center that people kind of denote, but it's defined by other people. Immediately people start talking about schooling, parenting, and society create this thing. So
Mm-hmm.
like not only dialogic, but it doesn't even exist. Right?
Yeah.
Do you know how weird that is? How does that sort of center come into being in your mind? Like, do you have a certain person that is that neurotypical kind of idea, or is it the thing that you were always trying to reach? I'm thinking of Don Quixote, the impossible
Mm.
dream.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I know exactly what you're talking about. I think for me, it's different maybe than for other people who have had ADHD. So I'm ADHD. That's my kind of neurodivergence. But I think people who have known about and been struggling with their ADHD most of their life will have a different perspective. I only found out that I was ADHD a couple of years ago. I'm 38. Yeah, 30. I had to think about that. I'm 38 now. So it was, in my mid 30s that I found out that I had ADHD. And it really did make a lot of sense for everything I'd experienced throughout my life. I'm like, oh, now I'm understanding some of the things that like made me feel weird or made me feel like I wasn't being successful, and why couldn't I do these things? So um, I think part of me is always going to be trying to reach that normal. Um, but I think that's because I've been doing that so much for my life, um, without recognizing or realizing that there were other ways to be, and that like what was happening with me wasn't my fault. So for a lot of my life, it felt like it was my fault and like I should have been doing better and I should have been, less lazy or whatever, words you want to use for it. But this kind of new person that I am that understands neurodivergence a little bit better and is kind of on this ADHD journey, I'm trying to look at it more of like, this is who you are and it's okay to be this way, and everybody's different. So it's okay that like, everybody is going to be thinking differently, everybody's going to be behaving a little bit differently, especially because of their background. So it still kind of fits into my worldview. But I know there's that kind of like little girl inside that's always going to be trying to be, quote unquote normal.
Yeah, so I'm hearing two things. One, that it was actually a liberating thing to get this label, and liberating because it was no longer your fault.
Mm,
Um,
yeah.
and that's really interesting. And then because that taps into what labels can and cannot do. Um, I guess I have so many questions. Like, would it have been as useful and liberating at 5 to know you had ADHD? Or was that just a really important part of the journey to just feel like it was you and then realize it wasn't you? So you said it was an aha kind of moment. It was like, oh, like, how a novel changes when you know the ending.
Yes, yeah. Yeah, it was a little bit of an aha moment. The way that I ended up getting diagnosed was I'd been in therapy for a few years. Um, and speaking with my therapist about like normal everyday problems that I was running into, completing my work or focusing. Um, I kind of started to question. I was seeing, information on TikTok and Instagram and social media. And I was like, I kind of do question whether or not like maybe I might be ADHD because all these things that people are saying about ADHD people, a lot of it's kind of resonating with me, but I don't want to self-diagnose myself. I don't want to, I want to make sure that I'm going down the right path. So I went through, and not everybody can do this because testing is expensive, but I went through an extensive test to kind of check for a bunch of different neurological differences, and ADHD was the result. So once I had that result and was able to be like, oh, okay, this is actually what's happening, um, I did more research on it and found out like ADHD gets kind of a bad rep because I think most people just think, oh, that's the kid that can't sit still. Or, oh, that's the kid that's daydreaming and, or is talking too much and changing the subject. Like it's a very outward, um, outward experience for a lot of ADHD people. I think particularly males, because that seems to be what was studied more heavily than more recent times. They've started to study women with ADHD. So understanding that ADHD as an internal experience is also a valid experience was something that I really wanted to understand how I could work with that and what I could do to improve areas of my life I was getting frustrated with.
Does it result at all in a kind of embrace of the way you think?
I think for the most part, there's still option there's still times where I find myself um so one of the things that is most difficult with ADHD for me is the ability to start something. And I kind of associate that with what ADHD books and people have described as transitioning. So I'm doing one activity, but I need to transition and to start this other activity. I really struggle with being like, just do the thing, just go do the thing. Even if it's something like I enjoy doing, it's a video game. I have a hard time starting a video game because I get in my head about like, well, I need 3 hours to really get into it and understand if I want to be playing this, and I need all this time to do this, and I don't know if I have 3 hours. I don't know if I want to commit to 3 hours right now. Um, and then you just kind of get a little bit. overwhelmed with this amount of what feels like decisions that you are making when it really boils down to just go start it and see what happens. Um, so that's not a portion of my brain that I enjoy.
Hmm.
That's something that I wish I could have less of. But I do know that there are parts of being ADHD that really makes me creative and really makes me feel like I can help people in unique ways that maybe not everybody thinks about. So I do really appreciate parts of it, but I still think there's absolutely just everyday struggles that, for things that you want to do personally in your own life that can still be very frustrating.
Well, it sounds like they're two different things. One is the way you think, you can celebrate that. The other is you get overwhelmed by the scheduling that has to fit into the blocks, the clock.
Hmm.
That seems to be where the conflict is, right? It's not you now as a person, it's you fitting into that. Do I have 3 hours? Because my brain needs this to get into something.
Hmm.
Yeah, and it reminds me of how difficult it is for me to drive somewhere. Google Maps has changed my life, but if like I don't have reception, I panic because I can't find anything. And if I don't, it's like my assistive tool. If I don't have it, I am really hosed. So I totally get that. And so you get it's not just overwhelmed, but you get panicked trying to plan it.
Yeah, yeah,
Because
absolutely.
it's the same kind of thing because you just and then an hour's gone by and you're like, oh well, now it's not even possible to do this thing. So here's what I want to know. Is there a time that um well, first of all, do you think of the ADHD as a part of yourself, or is it something that's sitting in you, like the real you is not that? But kind of fighting with it, or you're a frenemy of it, or sometimes you want it, sometimes you want to put it away. I'm thinking like in Inside Out when they don't want nostalgia, so
Mm,
they put her back and they're like, not yet, put her back in the
yeah.
closet. She's trying to come out with tea, they're like, no, no, no. So like, is it like an entity that comes in and out, or is it just part of your holistic you? Do you have a name for it? I don't know. How do you think of it in your
Yeah.
life?
So I think maybe Inside Out might be, I mean, the best way to think about these things because all of these things are still me. So I still think of the like collectively, this is who I am, this is part of my personality and part of how I operate. But there are times where I'm doing something and then like random song comes in my head and I'm like, nope, I wish that wasn't there right now. And it's almost like, hey, can you put that away? And so you just end up talking to yourself like, let's do something else with that. No? Okay. All right, great. I guess we're not gonna get much else done today because we're stuck thinking about this thing. So I do think it's a little bit of both, where you have conversations with yourself and you kind of end up viewing it as like a little bit of a separate entity, but overall it still feels like it's a part of me and a part of who I am.
It sounds a little invasive sometimes.
Yeah, yeah, a little jarring.
Yeah. So like what do you do about that? If you like, can you put her away?
Yeah, so I think the more that I've learned about ADHD and the more I've practiced trying to deal with things, I have found that some methods work for me that don't work for other people, and some methods don't work for me that do work for other people. So for me, I find that if I am focusing on a thought, I call it thought spiraling, and I just can't seem to stop thinking about that thought. I have to go distract myself. And I know that's not a healthy reaction if that's all you're doing is distracting yourself. But when I'm in the middle of a thought spiral and I've tried the breathing techniques and I've tried the meditation and I've tried all these other things and it's just not stopping. I need to go watch something on TV that is going to distract my brain for a little bit. I'm going to play an audiobook or I'm going to play a video game or I need something that is very distracting to pull me out of those thoughts and give my brain a second to kind of reset. And then usually after, maybe 30 minutes or so, I can kind of be like, okay, that has stopped. Let's go back to trying to do whatever it was we were doing before.
So you need something to focus yourself, but not something that's overwhelming.
Hmm.
It sounds like very specific self-medicating electronic
Yeah. Yeah,
video.
it is going to be different for every person. Like I'm not as distracted by music. A lot of times I am distracted by music, but there are times when I've put on music and I'm like, nope, this is not enough to stop the thought spiral. I need like something that is making me thinking about something and making me really redirecting what my entire brain is doing right now.
What's it like to have a thought spiral? Like, is this a thought that, like, sort of you're preoccupied with and you start sort of literally going around it in circles and angles, and does it get like the pace escalates? I'm thinking like you're like the
Yeah.
cam that,
So the spiral part of it is it can escalate, it can go faster, but most of the time for me it starts and I'm going around in this circle that is like kind of a similar thought, but then those thoughts trail into other types of thoughts and it gets darker and darker. I guess you could say that like I find the more like, oh, this is bad. Oh, but this is really bad. Oh, this is really, really, really bad. And you start kind of digging yourself a hole that is going to be really hard to get out of if you don't stop what you're doing or, stop the thought spiral. So I have to, um, I have to recognize that it's a thought spiral in the first place. And sometimes I don't even recognize it. Sometimes I'll be kind of venting to my husband about something and I'm really working myself up and getting upset and, kind of getting into a headspace. And he's like, I think maybe you're having like a thought spiral right now. Why don't we do something different and we can come back to talking about this in a little bit? And I'm like, yep, all right, great. So he's really helpful, being a part of my support system and knowing like what I need and how I can, you know, accomplish the task of talking about what the issue is without really
Mhm.
becoming so emotional about it that I can no longer think about it.
I'm just imagining it. He probably didn't leap out as a husband like that. Did you? Did he go to therapy with you? Did you learn the techniques to teach him to kind of recognize and help with that?
So one of the biggest things that I love about my relationship with my husband is we've always been really good at communicating. And it feels such a silly thing, when you talk to other couples and you're like, communicating's the thing. It's really hard to communicate sometimes. But I love that for our relationship, we have pretty much always like, hey, I'm upset about this thing. It doesn't make sense to me why I'm upset about this thing, but like I'm literally communicating everything out loud, regardless if it makes sense. I'm just saying, like, I'm really mad right now. I don't know why I'm mad, but I'm really mad and I don't know how to deal with it. And I think I need a few minutes. And I don't think I want to talk to you right now, but I think, okay, I'm gonna sit here next to you on the couch, but I don't want to talk to you and I don't want you to touch me. Let me just be mad for a few minutes. So that kind of communication where you can really say everything you're feeling, everything you're thinking out loud, even if you're like, I don't even know where it's coming from, has really helped us figure out kind of how to approach a lot of problems. The ADHD stuff that does come up with our relationship, but just relationship problems in general. I have gone to therapy probably eight years now. I just think therapy is great. You don't have to be going through something traumatic to go to therapy. It's just helpful in really helping you figure out like, why do I think the way that I think? And, did the way my parents raised me kind of affect the way that I think about the world? And do I need to change that worldview? And then he did start going to therapy in the last couple of years, but I think I would talk to him about my therapy sessions. I was very open. I would be like, today we talked about, this thing that we kind of had an argument about earlier this week. And, I've felt like I needed to talk to her and tell her these things. And these were the solutions that she suggested. And here's some things that I think we can try. Um, so yeah, I think just the open communication about what I'm talking about in therapy, and anytime and either one of us feels like, something's happening, emotional imbalance is happening, that we're able to talk about it out loud has really helped.
Yeah, I noticed that you emphasize giving verbal presence to the spiraling or stream of consciousness or whatever's happening. Did you know? I don't know if I shared my syllabus, but I'm actually teaching Anna Green Gables.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, we're going to look at her as neurodivergent. And there, I think you could easily say she's working on ADHD, and it's this very creative and verbal way of rendering it. And the other funny thing is, I'm the other ADHD person I'm interviewing is a very good friend of mine, happens to be female as well. So I
Mm,
think we've broken stereotypes on this point. One of my students, I had them study the theme of passing a couple semesters ago, passing for white, passing for straight,
mhm,
and at the end, and passing, I had them do Gatsby, who's passing as upper class. At the end,
mhm.
I had them do anything they wanted to do. And a student of mine did female autism and those who pass because she said that it's more common for women to mask and to kind of go under the radar.
Yeah.
And that's sort of what you were saying, that your typical ADHD is more of a male, more of behavior, more of sort of out the kid who can't sit still and such. So I'm wondering if we're looking at some other kind of verbally oriented ADHD that seeks expression. It seems to intersect almost with anxiety to me.
Honestly, the like I said, looking back at my childhood, there's a lot where I'm like, oh, okay. I was very much masking with my schoolwork, I guess you could say, because I think a lot of teachers back then were looking for kids that were failing. And, why would they be failing? Why were they struggling with, all their schoolwork? I wasn't failing. I was getting B's mostly. I didn't really care about getting an A, so I only tried enough to to get the B, and I'd be like, that's fine.
Mhm.
Um, and even at some point, I think in elementary school, they put me in like the gifted classes. So I wasn't really struggling at, school was fun and easy for me when it came to the actual subject. It was on the playground that I was, oh, this is maybe where you're seeing some of the like hyperactivity and like kind of unknown things. Like in elementary school, I did a lot of barking like a dog. And that's a lot of outward expression and kind of just having these different scenarios that I was playing out with friends. And I think that can still be normal, but it's just kind of the way that I realize I went about things that I'm like, oh, okay, there's the hyperactivity part of it that, maybe just kind of went under the radar because it was on the recess. It was during recess, it was on the playground. But yeah, I think there's so much masking for some of these neurodivergent things that it is hard to diagnose and it is hard to see that like, oh no, I was still struggling with doing schoolwork. It just didn't show up in my grades because they weren't doing things that would stop me from getting a good grade. Because I'm able to, complete an assignment 5 minutes before class started. Like I was very good at procrastinating and still passing the class. So it just kind of learning how to recognize those things and recognize that like even though they're still doing good at portions of their life doesn't mean that they don't have issues with other parts of their life.
When the method was the problem, not the work.
Hmm.
So until they were looking at your method, until it was a problem, you could
Hmm.
dash it off. Now, but the playground is a different curriculum. What's
It
your
is.
is what you're saying, which
Yeah.
is interesting because most of the time, learning disabilities kind of come out in the school structure, but in this case, you weren't like playing properly for
Yeah,
imaginary
like I was
play.
kind of a weird kid. Like I know that you can pretend to be an animal for, kindergarten, maybe first grade. I continued to pretend to be a dog like all the way up through like fourth or fifth grade. Um, and it was with the same group of people that have known me since I was little, so none of them really ever shunned me for it. Like I had some friends and some friends was enough, and then it just never really nobody ever came up to me and was like, "Hey, that's kind of a weird thing you're doing." So Socially, it never occurred to me that it was weird until I moved and I moved to a different state. And my mom was like, maybe we don't do that thing anymore because I think you have a chance to kind of like reset some of your social experiences. So, like, this is probably a thing that maybe we don't do this anymore.
It's sort of interesting because identification with animals is a major core theme of our works. We're doing Incident of the Dog in the Nighttime,
Mm.
which is narrated by an autistic teen, and he has a real relationship with animals. And we're doing Temple Grandin's film, who also pioneered animal care in the West. And another one we're doing is a big animal book. And so I I'm not surprised to kind of hear
Yeah.
that. And one of the questions I always ask is like, do you feel like you have a different relationship at all with the natural world or ecology or animals or children? Or any sort of relationships that are non-normative, that maybe you appreciate things in a different way than neurotypical people.
So I think I've always had, I don't want to say an understanding with animals, but like an ability to see what's happening with the like what an animal might be trying to communicate. Um, I've had a lot of pets growing up, but even like we had when I was in elementary school, we had a neighbor that had a turkey. And I would go over to the fence where this turkey was, and I would imitate the turkey noises because that was apparently my thing, imitating animals. And I don't know, like the turkey kind of seemed to enjoy having like a weird, back and forth where we were like talking to each other. But those were kind of my experiences with a lot of animals was that like I wanted to be able to communicate and try and figure out what they were doing. I have three cats right now, and I feel pretty in tuned with how they behave, and cats are kind of notorious for hiding when they get sick and hiding when something is happening.
Mhm.
Um, so it's interesting where I'm like sitting here going, they're not laying the right way, and they're just looking uncomfortable. I don't know how to explain it. Like I'm telling my husband this. And he's like, okay. And I'm like, I think we should take him to the vet. Like something's going on here, and I don't know what it is, but they don't look like they feel good. And it's kind of hard for a lot of people to pinpoint that.
Is that a general skill you feel you have? Is this kind of kinetic interpretation, or is that specifically animal? Um, I think there's a kinetic understanding there or something. Is it specifically animals, or does it translate? Do you read the room? Like, are you one of those people that there's some people who get overwhelmed in social environments because they're processing way more than anyone else. They're seeing body language, they're reading tones of voice and posture in a way that like text people like me wouldn't see. And so I
Yeah,
don't know. Yeah.
that's 100% what I'm like. The Ever since I was little, that I can remember and that people have told me about, any sort of school situation. I was able to recognize like another kid in the classroom raised his hand, asked a question, and the way he asked the question, the teacher thought there was one response he was looking for. So the teacher answered his question, but she actually wasn't answering the question that he had. So I would have her finish t telling you and giving the explanation and then raise my hand and then reframe the question and say, ask a new question to make sure that he got the information that he was actually looking for. And I kind of done that basically my whole life is figuring out what people are actually trying to say, even when they themselves don't know how to kind of formulate the question or formulate what they're looking for. Um, and
Mhm.
I also think like in emotionally, I sit and read the room, like how somebody's walking, how somebody's moving, just general facial expressions. I do a lot of that, trying to figure out how everybody's doing. I think some of that can also come from having um a parent with some anger issues growing up and
Hmm.
kind of learning to read the room for, how is my parent doing? Are they upset right now? Do I need to they're going to walk in the room and do I need to get up from the couch and start doing something because they're going to be upset that I'm, just sitting or whatever. So I think some of that isn't necessarily ADHD. It might also just come from like environmental factors that your body starts to kind of pay attention to. But yeah, I think I found myself in a lot of ways trying to figure out how to read people and interpret things.
And it's not necessarily your neurodivergent superpower. And it might actually be part of response to environment, but it also sounds like it might be part of how you've become aware of your brain and how it responds to the environment. It sounds like
Yes.
that's kind of the retrospective story that you've learned from the thing from and you research it. I do the same thing whenever there's anything I have to read all the literature I can on something. So what like but I guess what I'm wondering is obviously the diagnosis has helped you a lot. What about a
Mhm.
community? Have you reached out to other ADHD people? Are you part of a bigger network? Is that of interest to you? Is that helpful?
So I haven't joined any sort of like official groups or anything, but the way that I have found a form of a community, my best friend has ADHD. She's a woman. Um, but she was diagnosed kind of unusually for girls when she was like 11. And because she had that early diagnosis, she got a lot of coaching on it and learned strategies that she could use throughout her life. So she's never reached the point where she felt like she, wanted to try medication because she had all these coping mechanisms and strategies that were taught to her at a young age. So I will often talk to her about like things that I'm struggling with and kind of like, are there things that you know about that can help with this type of issue? And then also there's the internet now. Like YouTube is a really interesting resource. Now, I do think you have to be careful about who you're listening to because just because they're on YouTube doesn't make them an expert. But there are larger channels that have become well-known advocates for ADHD, and they talk about like, hey, here's how I declutter my house. Here's how I've organized my house to work for an ADHD brain. And there's some really interesting, one of the biggest things that I've gotten from one of these channels is if you have an item and you're using it in a certain location in your house, put the organizer in that location. And so, like, if you're taking off your clothes and you're throwing your clothes on the floor where you take them off in your bedroom and your hamper is across the room, move the hamper.
Move the hamper.
Move
Yes.
the hamper over to where you're taking off your clothes, and then you'll put your clothes in the hamper. And that was like earth-shattering to me that I was like, oh yeah. So I've really started to try and look at, slowly moving things around in my house to being like, I'm clearly using this here. Let me just figure out how to organize it here rather than having it someplace where I'm never going to put it away again.
Well, what you're talking about is the fundamental debate about disability, right?
Hmm.
Is the person to be socialized to accommodate the world, or is the world the problem? Right. And so what you're learning is that the world is the problem. And so move the hamper.
Hmm.
And that's, like our playgrounds are all wrong and everything's all wrong and in fact, what AI is teaching me is that not only was our sort of old-fashioned methods ableist, but something a computer can do.
Yeah. Yeah.
Which is really going to push us to appreciate a neurodiversity and multiple assessment methods in a whole different way. I did want to ask, not to be like forward, but your parents confused me because several things that are really different came out. One being, you sort of had to learn to read the room. Another being like, it was helpful that your mom said maybe don't bark in third grade anymore.
Yeah.
It sounds like that there's both things, sort of stories of enabling and stories of shaming or microaggressions. So I don't know, just if you could say something about that,
Yeah.
maybe a story that it went both ways. Parenting is hard, and I appreciate the parenting neurodivergence. There probably wasn't a manual. Um,
Yeah.
so, and then I guess so I want to kind of know about that, but also um, whether it's even helpful where we are now is recognizing ableism and normativity is just as problematic as neurodivergence. But is that helpful, or is it more helpful to say, yes, I have ADHD, parents really weren't prepared for it. It was tough. Or is it helpful to kind of reconsider it from a view that they wouldn't have had? So I don't know if you can package all that up with your thoughts.
Yeah. So I'll start with I think self-reflection is really important. And my mom has been good about that. And I kind of I do want to give her the credit and the kudos, where I can, that it's really hard to self-reflect on yourself, your parenting, something that you consider a very, very important part of your life. And everything she ever did was with the intention of loving us and making sure that we grew up to be, good people. But parents aren't perfect. Parents have their own issues. There's generational trauma that comes from her own parents. So I think when I was younger, there were a lot of issues that she herself was kind of coming to terms with and dealing with. And that didn't happen perfectly. But as I've grown in my relationship with her, and she's grown in kind of understanding a lot of the things that we're talking about together. There's been a lot of really helpful things that we've had conversations about, and she's been open to hearing and talking with me about. So the other interesting part is that my mom was a teacher her whole life, basically her whole career. So you would think that a teacher who has at least some understanding of ADHD and, different kind of problems that might occur in the classroom, that she would recognize that. But one, there wasn't any research really when I was growing up on what ADHD looked like in women or girls. So
Mhm.
it was largely to be believed that it was like kind of mostly a boy issue.
Yeah,
And two, I think it's really difficult for you to see what's right in front of you. I think when you are involved in your own life and you're wrapped up in the problems that come with it, and you're just trying to kind of like survive day by day with, two young kids and,
yeah,
maybe not enough money to get through the week, that really doesn't cross your mind that maybe there's something else going on. I think at the time it just feels like, oh, this is just another thing that, okay, let's just talk about this. Let's see how if we can work this out. And she didn't really think about maybe there might have been some signs that like there was some sort of neurodivergence.
hmm
Um, but when we talk about it now, we kind of laugh a little bit because I'm like, oh my gosh, I shoved papers into my backpack, just one after the other, crinkled. She would open my backpack and pull these things out and try and straighten them and just be like, what are you doing? And I'm like, I don't know. It's
right.
it's there. It's fine. You can still read it, right? Like
So now it's
so
funny. Now
yeah,
it's
laughing
like,
at the
yeah,
things that were like, oh, that is kind of obviously an ADHD thing that we just never occurred. Same thing with my dad. We realized after my diagnosis, I started having a conversation with her and I was like, Dad has ADHD. Never been diagnosed. He's in his 80s. He absolutely has ADHD. He is the most like off in his own world. And then he'll be listening to the conversation, but he'll change the topic and he'll be like, hey, I want to talk. Like, it's very like classic ADHD. But again, you just kind of don't see it when it's
right.
somebody that you're with every day and you're communicating with every day. So I think it's one of those things where if you're a parent, accept that you're gonna make mistakes. Like there's going to be times where you miss a major thing, or something you say is going to be remembered by your kid that you're never going to remember saying or doing. I just think it's important to have open conversations of like, I don't remember that, but like if you remember it, it's clearly affected you somehow. You know, how does that make you feel? What can we do to, yeah, make you feel better about this? Because sometimes I think I go to my mom for conversations of just like, this isn't about blame, this isn't about guilt. This is me just trying to understand my own feelings and maybe just kind of feel better about what happened. And sometimes all I need is just to like talk to you and hear you go, oh, I didn't even realize that was a problem at the time. So I think a lot
Right.
of years of therapy have helped, is really the kind of short answer.
Well, it sounds like the diagnosis as the end of the novel actually really helped rewrite the novel for
Hmm.
everybody because now it's a perspective that you can share that at the time was your fault.
Yeah, yeah, it felt like a conflict between the two of us when really it came down to like this other thing that neither of us understood or knew how to deal with. And it was hard for both of us. And I think recognizing that like, yeah, it was difficult to kind of try and deal with a thing that wasn't even named.
Well, one of my favorite things about Anne of Green Gables is actually how Marilla de deals with Anne's mishaps and dialogue that lasts pages and pages. I think she is very, very funny. She's like this comic presence in the novel. Um, very like Victorian, trying to raise this really creative, modern, probably neurodivergent child. It's a fantastic novel. I hope the students like it. Now, I guess I just want to end. I don't want to overburden the students by going on too long, but I think we're pretty perfect. And I think this has been really great and natural, and I hope that you've enjoyed it.
Oh yeah,
Um,
absolutely.
yeah, I started out my career as an interviewer for market research, actually. So in some ways, I'm getting back to my first love.
Mhm.
But mostly I did children. So like I'm like she could probably tell from my interview questions that some of them are a little nutty and creative because I think you learn so much that way.
Mhm.
But so this most of the students are you said you're 38. So most of the students are sort of between 18 and 28. We have a lot of people in their sort of returning years, and then we have a handful of returning students of all ages. Um, so they may or may not know like Steven Universe or what have you.
Mm.
But if you're gonna, but I think some of my younger students would really, really love to hear that. Like, what characters matter to you that you think of as neurodivergent? Maybe you and your friend even banter about. Kind of wish I'd interviewed you and your friend because I think that would have added an
Mm.
interesting dynamic. But like, what do you banter about? Whom do you consider neurodivergent? Why is it important that you do in media? And what you might want to say to the class about looking at those characters? Because I do hope they develop projects in popular culture.
Yeah. So one, I think it's really important to have representation of all types of people and all types of ways of thinking because once you start to recognize yourself in a character, you can also start to recognize how that character is dealing with things. And maybe there's things that are difficult for that character that you're like, oh man, that's also difficult for me. And I didn't even realize that I was struggling with that. So, I think one of my favorite shows that really kind of has a broad range of neurodiversity is Steven Universe. And if you're unfamiliar, it is a cartoon, but it's a really well-made cartoon. I do think you could, easily show it to kids and they'd have a great time with it just as anything else. But I watched it as an adult. And it really kind of dives into a little bit later in the season in the series. It starts to dive into um, you know, how somebody might think differently and how do you deal with that and how do you deal with your emotions when you're, kind of wrapped up in it. Even at some point there's, in the very, very later part of the series, the main character has to deal with PTSD and kind of this response of like, I've been through some traumatic stuff And now I'm having anxiety responses and depression responses, and just learning to like talk about that and say, like, no, you have been through something, and it's okay to talk about it. And it's okay to learn how to deal with it. So I love a lot about the show. You'll see ADHD represented, you'll see autism represented, um, you'll see different uh, orientations represented. So it's just a really great show. But I would say also it's important to let your brain behave the way your brain is going to behave and find things that work for you. But also, don't make excuses for yourself. I don't know if that makes sense, because don't sit there and call yourself lazy. Uh don't make yourself feel bad about stuff. But I think it's still important that, like, if there's an obstacle, don't just ignore it. Um, Approach it, figure out a way to handle it in a way that you can handle it, but still overcome the obstacle. Still come, still find a way to accomplish what you're trying to accomplish. So I think that's one of the more important things that I really think is important for anybody who's neurodivergent. That, like, we do have to live within whatever society has set up. But we can start making things better for ourselves and making things better for, other people in the future.
A lot of my students are in this sort of Gen Z-ish
Hmm.
category. Do you feel like they're, I don't know, going to be more informed? They're going to be better at it? Or do they, like, will they be equipped in a different way, especially having classes like this? Or do you feel like, I don't know, something you want to spare them that you figured out at 38?
I think the interesting thing about every new generation is there's always something that the new generation is dealing with that the previous generation didn't have to deal with. We had technology growing up, but not the way Gen Z has it. Gen Z has had the internet from like day one. And that's both been a blessing and a burden for them. So I think there's going to be different challenges that they're going to have to face, that may be more social challenges, since they're used to doing a lot of communicating online, and a lot of their relationships online, which is something I never really had to deal with. Um, but I always know, especially since I was a history teacher for a bit, every generation figures it out. Every generation has the thing that is going to be the downfall of society. And, 50 years ago, it was the internet. 70 years ago, it was a calculator. Like, there's always some sort of technology that everybody's like, oh my gosh, I can't believe we're gonna have this. So AI is the thing right now that everybody's, doom and gloom about. And it's important to think about how we use it, and how we're going to use it moving forward. But I do have faith that we will figure it out. And at some point this will work out for, the next generations. I don't know that I had anything that I've had any major revelation on, other than just communicating with everybody in my life has really helped me. Um, if they're open to communicating back with me, obviously, if you have someone that's not open to that, it's not going to be helpful. But communicating with everybody in my life has been really helpful. Having some sort of therapy, if you can find it and you have a way to have that resource, has been extremely helpful for me in many different situations. So that's what I would say. Start looking up things that maybe you're struggling with. Start looking at what other people are doing and how they're going about overcoming those obstacles. But every person's different. So, one thing that works for them might not work for you. And it's kind of a trial and error process. So, but I do have faith that there is going to be something that will be able to help every person. Just kind of depends on what it is.
Well, that's actually so much better than most people say social media is the gloom and doom of society. So I happen to agree with you. I think multimedia is a good thing. In the 18th century, they freaked out about the novel, about
Yep.
young girls reading about novels and that they would all be lose their virtue. Well, maybe that did happen a little bit. Maybe they were correct, but who doesn't love their novels? Thank you so much, Courtney. I'm gonna stop recording and then we can say our personal goodbyes because I want to thank you even more. But thank you for talking to the class today. I think they're really going to enjoy this new method. Stop recording.